Hey, welcome, folks. I'm just looking at my monitor to make sure I got the little audio ping ping thing going on, saying that you can hear me and so forth. Welcome aboard. Hey, looking forward to talking today. It's going to be kind of an involved lecture, but it's on some of my favorite topics, especially around management. Maybe you know, I just recently completed a fundamentals of people management series on this channel, Nutshell Brainery, because I believe strongly that we need really, really good people managers. And these are few and far between in some instances. Well, today we're going to talk about why this is historically, right, where we started and where we are today through our readings and so forth. To start with, I'm going to tell you a story. Tell you just an itty-bitty little story. So I used to work for FedEx back 3 lifetimes ago. I worked for Federal Express, FedEx. You know them as FedEx. And one of the many things I did with FedEx is I was a courier, meaning I'm the one that delivered all the packages. I just had a package delivered today, by the way. Now, there was FedEx and there was UPS, right? And well, of course, there were other companies as well, but these were kind of the two behemoths of the industry. And the way they ran things in terms of delivery for us couriers and so forth was very different. Now, for me, as a FedEx courier, I would show up early. I'd back my truck up to the conveyor belt, and then as the conveyor belt took the packages by, I'd grab the package that was mine. I knew my route, and I would set up my own truck the way I wanted to, with kind of a map in my head on how I was going to approach the day. So I got to make the decision around how I did my route, who was delivered first, who was going to be second, so on and so forth. And so that means that in my truck, I was constantly moving packages around to kind of try to figure out the most optimal route. Okay, that's FedEx. Now, UPS, they do it completely differently, or at least back in the day. Actually, I'm sure they still do it this way because it's the more efficient process, but we're going to talk about this. The driver does not set things up at all. They do not set up their truck. They have somebody else who pulls all the freight from the belt and sets up the truck in the exact same way every single time, following the most optimal route as figured out by computers. Now, it actually sort of does matter. Actually, it matters a lot how you do your route. You want more right-hand changes than left-hand changes. You want to avoid this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth. UPS had computers that would say, this is the optimal route. Tell the driver to take this one. FedEx, we decided our own optimal route. Okay, well, we're going to come back to this story as we talk about management in today's lecture, but I just wanted to kind of set that up because both have pros and cons, both follow different philosophies. And so that's what we get to explore. So, what are we talking about today? Managers. All right, managers, why they suck and why they don't. Okay. Now, if you've been following this lecture series, you know that we've been kind of exploring how capitalism came about and kind of the key elements of capitalism. And we've also talked about some of the faults in capitalism. And one of them that we explored last week with our readings around Lady Chatterley's Lover and so forth is kind of management. Well, back in the day, and it wasn't that long ago, and we still have issues. We're going to come to this. There were really only a few criteria you needed to be a manager. You had to be a white male who's related to the owner. Those were your 3 criteria. white, male, related to the owner. So we're talking about the owner's son, son-in-law, nephew, cousin, who knows what, right? It was pure, unadulterated nepotism. I mean, to the point of where it was like considered a best practice. Male, white, related to the owner. Notice we are not talking about educated, wasn't a criteria. Experience wasn't a criteria. Skilled wasn't a criteria. Interest in the position wasn't a criteria. All you needed was the relationship, right? That's it. Well, things are different today, but there's still issues, and we're going to talk about what those are and how it works. But first, let's talk about, I got my phone ringing and I'm turning it off. I hate that. Let's talk about why things are different today. All right. Let's first talk about Henri Fayol. Henri Fayol, he wrote General Industrial Management and so forth, a little bit about him. He looked around at managers and said, well, son of a, there's no training material out there. There are no common practices. There's no systematic approach to training and developing managers. Remember, that was not an issue, right? You didn't need trained managers. Now, at the end of this little reading, I'm going to ask the question, are we doing these things? But more about that in a moment. So he said, all right, we need some basic systematic training for managers. All right, we need to look at managers as a profession. Well, now that's part of the problem that we have today, by the way. Let me explain how we get managers today. Now, of course, this isn't always the case. I am practicing some hyperbole to make a point. But here's how managers are figured out. It's no longer nepotism, it's now the Peter Principle. The Peter Principle says that you are promoted to your level of incompetence. All right, what does it mean to be promoted to your level of incompetence? Well, I'll show you what it means. Let's say that you work in a call center and you're really good at your job. I mean, the customers love you, your throughput time is great, so on and so forth. And so they say, you know what, we're going to make you kind of a lead over a shift, okay? You're going to be the shift lead over the call center. Now, you're still doing your job. You're still doing your call center job. You're just the shift lead now. And so people say, okay, that's fine. And so you continue to do your work and you continue to have great results. And a few of your other people, you're the shift lead. All right, they're doing fine, but they're still really impressed with you. And so now they say, you know what? We are going to make you the manager over the call center, which means you're not really doing call center job anymore. You're not doing your call work. You're managing people. Well, you're not trained to be a manager. That you were a great call center representative. You weren't trained to be a manager. And so now you flounder. Now you kind of struggle in your job because this isn't your area of expertise. And now you are incompetent. Where before your competence was high, now you are at your level of incompetence. You have been promoted to your level of incompetence. That is the Peter Principle. Many of you have probably seen this. Many of you may have experienced this in terms of your manager or you being a manager and so forth. Now, the reason for this is that we don't often have an appreciation for the skill set that is management. Okay? And this is what Henri Fayol is kind of pointing out. We don't have formal training around managers. Now, today we do, but we don't really pay much attention to it. So check this out. It would be nothing at all to say you're a really good architect. We're going to make you the manager over architects. That you wouldn't blink an eye. But who would say, you're a really good doctor, we're going to make you an architect for clinics where doctors work? That makes no sense at all, because that's a distinct skill set, doctor, architect, but we don't feel the same way about management always. So this is what Henri Fayol is kind of on about. We're going to talk about some of these. By the way, Cassie says, I was promoted to be a manager and now am going for the director position. And that is, first of all, a phenomenal, oh, wrong button here. There we go. Let's come over here. Why is that doing that? Why is that doing that? I don't want it to do that. Oh, I see, because I have this one up here, and I want this one down here. Okay, now we get the light bulbs, and I'm going to throw in a few light bulbs for that. That's great, Cassie. That's really great, and I hope you're getting the training you need to do this. I hope you're getting it. Let's talk. Set up a meeting with me. Send me an email. Let's talk, okay? So, management function, the managerial function. The managerial function finds its only outlet through the members of the organization, the body corporate, Fayol calls it. While the other functions bring into play material and machines, the managerial function operates only on the personnel. Okay, good, Cassie, reach out. I'm serious, let's talk. Now, what Fayol is saying here is that your measure of whether or not you're a good manager should be through the performance of your people. That should be the measure. How well are your people doing? And so management, by that measure, is a very selfless position. Servant leadership is often cited as a winning theory around management. And Cassie, we'll talk servant leadership when we meet up. But it is a selfless position. You are interested in your people performing, because the better they do, the better you do, because that's your job as a manager. So Fayol is the first one who's kind of figuring this out. All the others are just concerned about profits. What are the profits? What are the profits? Furthermore, Fayol says when it comes to management, there is nothing absolute. So check this out. The soundness and good working order of the body corporate, your organization, depend on a certain number of conditions termed indiscriminately principles, laws, rules. For preference, I shall adopt the term principles, while disassociating it from any suggestion of rigidity, for there is nothing rigid or absolute in management affairs. It is all a question of proportion. Yes. Okay, so now this is going to be a theme that we are going to see over and over and over throughout today's lecture, okay? Today we call this situational management. We bring to bear the management tools and competencies necessary for the situation. But no two situations are ever the same. There's nothing absolute or rigid. So whereas in the past, the white male relative who is only concerned about profits would just do the same thing over and over and over and to horrendous results, we are now seeing that we need to bring about some intelligent design in how we manage organizations. Seldom do we have to apply the same principle twice in identical conditions. Allowances must be made for different changing circumstances, for men just as different and changing, and for many other variable elements. Okay. Therefore, principles are flexible. Again, situational leadership. We want to be flexible and agile as we address things. I like how he puts here, a difficult art requiring intelligence, experience, decision, and proportion. These are the things that Fayol says we need to be a good manager. Intelligence, experience, decision, and proportion, balance. Okay. So now Fayol says, hey, if we're going to train these managers, he has a whole bunch of principles that he feels that we need to provide for our managers. We're not going to go over all the principles. We're going to go over the principles that I kind of like the most and we need to kind of think about the most. At least I think. And they're all good. Don't allow me to dissuade you from considering the others. It's just we have finite time, so I'm going to pick some favorites. First one is unity of command. Now, I pick unity of command because this is one that we really struggle with today. Fayol says this is important, and yet we don't really do it. Let me first define it. Unity of command says you should have one boss, okay? There is one person giving you direction on what needs to be done, what success looks like, what the overall expectations are, and all that good stuff, okay? So one authority, if you will. This is good because there's clarity and consistency in the direction and the expectations, and you know what you need to do. The problem is a lot of us have a lot of bosses. Now, just so you know, guys, this is especially the case in the tech industry today. The tech industry loves to do this thing that is called matrix marketing. Not marketing. Sorry, matrix management. We're not talking marketing today. We're talking management. Get with it, Lon. Matrix management. Here's the way it works. You have your direct manager. Fine. That person is there to sign your papers and so on and so forth. But your real managers are the various projects that you serve on. You're allocated out to all these different projects. So, for example, when I was in matrix marketing at Intel Corporation, I worked for HR, and so I had an HR manager, but I was farmed out to multiple projects. And these projects each had project managers. And so when it came time to really kind of figure out, well, where should I be applying my efforts and where should I be, focusing myself and what does success look like, I would get conflicting answers to these sort of things. And so this really caused a lot of thrash, and it continues to cause thrash today. So this is one area where Fayol's teachings are not really, permeating management today. Another one, he says, is we need to understand that individuals are subordinating their individual interests. All right? Now, first, let's define what that means. Second, let's talk about why it's important for a manager to understand this. First, what it means. You don't want to be at work. You don't want to be at work. You would rather be doing just about anything else. I actually have a video out there calling, you should have the Sunday blues, or you something like that. My point is that I really, really love my job. I love my job a lot. But I love other things more. I'd rather be home with my wife. I'd rather be working in my garden. I'd rather be working on my car. I'd rather be reading books. I'd rather be traveling. In other words, I have a lot of individual interests that I have subordinated, pushed down, set aside, so that I can work toward the interests of the organization. Now, Salt Lake Community College, it just so happens that their interests and my interests align, and so I get a great deal of reward from what I do. Nevertheless, every time you go to work, you push aside your own interests, subordinate them, and you are willing to be paid to work for the interests of somebody else. Okay, now that's what subordinating personal interest means. Why is it important for a manager to understand this? Well, first, the better you can align the organizational objectives with the person's individual interests, the better they will perform. I mentioned to you earlier, my interests align with Salt Lake Community Colleges. Therefore, it's really easy for me to get psyched up and enjoy my job because I'm doing what I would enjoy doing anyway. Okay, that's the first thing. Next thing you need to understand, a manager needs to understand, is that some people are ignorant of what needs to be done, and they're not really willing to put in a whole lot of work to overcome that ignorance. By the way, Mary says, do what you want and it won't feel like work. Yeah, that's what it's saying to a tremendous degree. Let me give you an example on ignorance, right? So I have my student syllabus, right? And I've said, hey, be sure to read the student syllabus. And you're like, yeah. I'm just talking in general. I'm not saying you, Jagat, or Cassie, or Mary. I'm just saying in general, right? So I say, hey, read the student syllabus. And, okay, I'll read the student. And they don't. Why not? Well, because I have other things to do. I'm willing to subordinate my individual interest to do the coursework because I get points for that. But I'm not willing to subordinate my individual interests to take the time to read the syllabus because I don't get points for that. And therefore, ignorance of course policies and so on and so forth comes about. Managers and professors need to understand this and need to understand there needs to be a reason why people will do what you ask them to do. Ambition. Some people are really, really ambitious. And so this will affect the way they do the work or don't do the work. Selfishness, laziness, and so forth. So managers need to understand that they need to make the work meaningful for the individual, as Mary pointed out. Okay? Another one, remuneration. Remuneration is a fancy-ass word for pay, but we need fancy words, right? It says a whole bunch of stuff here, right? But here's what it comes down to. Pay is a tricky thing. It really is. There are some things that you can control and affect when it comes to your pay, such as your education, your experience, and so on and so forth. But then there are other things that you really can't affect all that much. So let me show you what I mean here. Labor supply affects the degree to which you can pay someone or have to pay someone. If there's not many workers and you need workers, you need to pay more. If there are plenty of workers, then you can pay less. Labor supply. You can't control, you as an employee, you can't control this. And this is going to affect your pay. Geographic differences, where you live. Utah's probably somewhere in the middle. There's places a lot more expensive and places a lot less expensive. You can't control this. Competition, industry health and image, collective bargaining. These are things that affect your pay, but you don't have a lot of control over. On the other hand, you guys have control over your training and education. That's why you're here. Your skills, experience, performance, and what level of risk or responsibility you're willing to take on. Fayol points out that a really good, fair compensation package needs to include all these things. And again, this was new thinking, and managers need to be trained on how pay and compensation is provided. not going to worry about this one. We're going to go to this one because this one's my favorite. All right. And this is going to bring us back to the first part of my story with FedEx and UPS. Initiative. Thinking out a plan and ensuring its success is one of the keenest satisfactions for an intelligent man or woman to experience. It is also one of the most powerful stimulants for human endeavor. The power of thinking out and executing is what is called initiative. And freedom to propose and execute belongs to, each in its way, to initiative. At all levels of the organization, organizational ladder, zeal and energy on the part of employees is augmented by initiative. Okay, so what's all this mean? It means, listen, if you let employees figure out the problem and then figure out the solution on their own and stay out of their way, they are going to be a lot happier in their jobs than if you dictate every single little step that they need to take. So connecting this with my experience with FedEx, as I mentioned earlier, UPS, they followed a computer program and the driver just delivered the packages in the order the computer program required. Whereas with FedEx, I could make all the decisions. I would see what came off the belt in terms of the freight. I would see if it was P1, P2, P3, that means stuff for FedEx, and where they were in my route. I could decide what direction to take in the route. I could choose all that. And so with each package that came off, I was getting information that could then inform what decisions I'd make in terms of how I disposed of the day. And I found that really rewarding. And I'm just a schmuck courier. I mean, I'm the lowest of the lowest rung. And yet, by allowing me to make those decisions and practice initiative, I was really happy in that role. Raphael says, so that's why at FedEx be able to choose my route. They were banking on this idea. Now we're going to come back to the UPS one here in a moment, but just to kind of tie that together with the story. Okay, so that was Henri Fayol. Quick recap. He looked around and said, I don't see any systematic training programs. I am going to put forth some principles that we need to ensure that everybody has access to for training and so on and so forth. Okay. But now, oh, by the way, you deserve at least 2 more light bulbs. Let's go ahead and do 2 light bulbs. Okay. All right. So, I wonder where that's from. Interesting. Okay. Now, let's go to Douglas McGregor and methods of influence and control. We're basically going to talk about power and control here. And right away, your hackles go up when you hear power and control. Because, we fight power, we fight control, and we should. So, but he has a really interesting take on this. So let's go ahead and take a look at McGregor. He advocated a very human relations approach to management, power, and control. Whereas Fayol was just looking at training, McGregor is getting into the psychology of what's going on. He's much more interested in the psychological, behavioral aspects of management. So he's all over that. Interested in our beliefs and how it shapes our actions and so forth. So remember, Fayol said it's never the same thing twice. You need to be flexible. McGregor says the same thing. In the reading, he kind of jokes that The manual for a supervisory training program in one large company suggests that the instructor point out by analogy and example that the principles of organization are like the laws of physics. They are not, he says. He's mocking this thing. Management is not like the laws of physics. As Henri Fayol says, it's an art as well as a science. So he has several issues, first of all, McGregor, with how management is kind of considered in the day. And this continues on today, just so you know. He says, first of all, a lot of management principles are derived from what he calls inappropriate models. And what he means by inappropriate models are things like, the Bible, Sun Tzu's Art of War, Musashi's Book of Five Rings. These, and by the way, they still read these things in business school today. And his issue with this is, okay, the Bible is great if you want to start a Christian religion. It's not a management handbook. Sun Tzu's Art of War is great if you want to defeat an enemy through strategy. It's not a management handbook, right? So, and by the way, Musashi's Book of Five Rings is how to use samurai swords and why you want to use two swords when taking a prisoner versus one sword, right? And it's like, what does this have to do with management? This is all things that were really hot and in vogue and still are today. And he's like, no. We need to look at management as a distinct skill set, a distinct profession. Another issue he has with management, how it was being taught, was he said it was ethnocentric, meaning people were thinking about management in a way that was completely divorced from everything else going on in the world, like political, social, economic, and technological realities of the day. And so they were teaching management as though it was this universal constant and nothing changed, which is why you can still teach from the Bible, Sun Tzu's Art of War, and Musashi's Book of Five Rings, right? Because management is constant and always the same. No, he says, you need to really understand how political, social, economic, and technological realities affect management. Next one is he says there are just a bunch of erroneous assumptions about how to influence behavior. You've heard of the carrot and stick thing, right? If you do really well, here's a carrot, and if you do really poorly, here's a stick, and so on. And it's like, it's not that simple. It's not that simple by any measure. And so he said we really need to understand what is happening with human behavior and psychology through scientific method and not just by axioms of, well, everybody knows that blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, not everybody does know this. So, we won't worry about that. First, now, another thing he points out is that there are real limits to authority. A lot of managers and professors, for that matter, a lot of people who are in charge think that you're going to do something because I said so. And it's like, guess what? That's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of ways that employees can resist authority and, frankly, not get in trouble for it, okay? So, for example, maybe one of you works in manufacturing, or you work in a somewhat dangerous environment where you need to follow a lot of safety rules and so on and so forth. The truth of the matter is most of us follow the safety rules, but you know what? We don't We don't follow all of them because if we followed all the safety rules, we'd never get any work done. And so we kind of find this happy medium of where we're safe, but also getting the work done and efficient. Well, one way that a lot of workers can resist is they'll pull what's called a by the book, meaning if they're not happy with you as a manager, they will say, all right, I'm going to do everything by the book, which means work will slow down substantially, and yet you can't get them in trouble because they're doing things exactly the way it's supposed to be done. There's all kinds of different ways that workers can resist. And so what McGregor is saying is you need to understand it's a partnership and you need to respect the partnership. And it goes both ways with influence. And we're going to talk about that. Let's see. We'll talk about it right here. Okay. Power and influence. First of all, I have power. Let's talk us right now. Us right now in this classroom. Okay. I have power and influence over you. You have power and influence over me. It goes both ways. The problem is we're not always aware of the power and influence that we wield and how to wield it properly. One of the reasons for this is that power and control, they're often kind of considered, I don't want to say bad words, but they're loaded words. Power is like fire. It is amoral. It is just dependent on how it's used. It's not good or bad. It depends on how it's used. And so what we need to do is we need to understand what are our sources of power and how can we use these sources of power to influence others. And that means me influencing you and you influencing me. So let's play with this going forward. First of all, let me ask you this. And we're going to now get a whole bunch of light bulbs going on here, right? Hey, why do you listen to me and do as I ask? We got 8 folks here right now. You could be somewhere else. You could be somewhere else. You could watch this later on. You could not watch it at all. You could skip some assignment. Why do you do assignments, you show up, you participate. Why do you do this? Okay, so Mary says, all right, so knowledge and mentorship. All right, hold on to that one. We're going to follow up on this one, okay? Because I presumably know about this subject, okay? So we can earn a good grade and new experiences. Absolutely. And by the way, while I totally agree and believe Mary and Cassie, Jordan is saying what you're all thinking, which is, I want the points. That's why I'm here. That's why I do what you ask, because when we do what you ask, you give us points, and we want points. Raphael says, because it's part of the path the school has designed so you can succeed in your career. I like that. Mia, to become more valuable. Nice way of looking at that. Yes, Mia. You want to be more valuable to employers, to customers, investors, showing and so forth. Jagat, showing the knowledge. Nice. Okay, so you get it. Let's go through these in some detail. Let's go. Okay. Let's go formal power first. By the way, there's 2 types of power. Formal power and in relationship power or something like that. We'll come. I've only taught this 800 times, and now there's formal power and personal power. That's it. Personal power. There's 3 types of formal power, 3 types of personal power. Most of the time when we think about power with management, and in this case, we're going to use professor and student as an example, we think about formal power. So let me show you. First, we have legitimate or position power, okay? So in the case of our organization, our class, I'm the professor, you're the students. And this is a legitimate type of position power because Salt Lake Community College, which is a state institution of the state of Utah, part of the United States, they have the authority to put me in the position of professor and you as students. Therefore, it is a formal type of position power, okay? Now, here's the thing with this one, though, guys. This is a really, really transient form of power. Very fleeting. We've got 5 more semesters. Not 5 more semesters. 5 more weeks. 4 more weeks. Something like that. Let's just say 5. We have 5 weeks left in the semester. After this semester, I have no position power over you. None. None at all. Okay? So why would I say, do what I say because I'm the professor and I'm the boss, when that's such a temporary form of power, right? Now, you have legitimate position power over me. Now, this is something that I choose, but I choose to make it so. If I get an email from a stranger asking for help on something, maybe I can help them, maybe I can't, whatever. But if I ever get an email from a former student, I am highly likely to help them. However, if I get an email from a current student, it's guaranteed I will help you. It's guaranteed because you have position power. You are a current student, and I feel it is my obligation to help you in any sphere. So this is a form of position power that you hold over me. We then have reward power. This is the points, right? This is what Jordan was talking about. You want points? I have points. I am the holder of points. Behold, my points. You want them. And we've talked about this in terms of barter economy and so forth. You are willing to do what I want you to do because you want the points. This is the reward. Now, I'm willing to do what you want me to do. And the reward is I want comments, okay? I want chat and so forth. And so I'm willing to give you a lot of extra credit points to get that chat. So you have, and I want it, you have comments, you have thoughts, you have ideas. I want those, and I'm willing to give you things for them. So this is where you hold reward power over me, okay? Then we have coercive power, which is the opposite of reward power. Coercive power is when I can take away something you like. Now, I can't take away points. I feel that you've earned those. But, I could change the exam and make the study guide that you've been using worthless. That wouldn't be good, but if you pissed me off, right? Which you're not going to do. I could make these live streams really, really, it's a win-win, Mary, with the reward power. Totally a win-win. And it should always be a win-win. Managers forget this. I could make these live streams insanely boring. I could just say we're going to do it on Zoom, and I'll just come into the Zoom meeting and say, so, you did the reading. Any questions? and you're like, oh, shoot, I liked the live streams better, right? You can take things away from me as well that I want. So I have power over you through coercive power. You have power over me. You could stop commenting. You could stop attending. Okay? There's 8 folks here right now, but there's something like 15 or 16 people in the class. So they are withholding from me something that I really want. And so they're influencing me through coercive power. So again, it goes both ways. Now, these are the 4 types of formal power. But as I mentioned before, formal power is pretty transient. When it comes to things like my position as professor, that'll end in 5 weeks. In 5 weeks, you won't care about points I can give you. You've got a final grade. And in 5 weeks, I could say, I'm going to change the final. And you're going to be like, what the hell? I don't care. I'm not in your class anymore. These things do not have staying power. Okay? And managers, same thing. What has staying power? Personal power has staying power. Let me show you. First, we have expert power. Expert power is if I have insight and expertise that you want access to, then you will be more likely to do as I ask. So, for example, Cassie is applying to be a director. Cassie, I'd really like you to reach out to me. Let's set up some time and let me help you out on that, okay? I have expertise in this area. Furthermore, I'm going to have expertise after the class is over, right? So this is why I encourage people to subscribe to Nutshell Brainery and to subscribe to the newsletter so that you have constant access to my expertise even after the class is done. You guys as well, you have expertise in areas. Some of you have some expertise in areas where I might like to have access to that expertise one day. We are all expert in something. And so expert power can go a long way. We also have referent power. Referent power is when you just admire the person for whatever reason. They inspire you to want to work hard, to do well, to better yourself, to work past failure and to take that as a learning and to do better the next time, so on and so forth, right? This is where things like celebrity endorsements come from. We want to be associated with celebrity, something we're actually going to talk more about next week. And so we buy what they wear and so on and so forth. Referent power, maybe it's your, a parent or an uncle or aunt or a religious leader or a political leader, folks who you just really look up to. This is a form of power, and it's one rooted in whatever the person wants. So, for example, I have worked with people that I don't actually really like them personally, but I really admire their work ethic and what they bring and the contributions they make, and I want to be more like that. You don't necessarily have to love the person. You have to admire what they're bringing to the game. And then the third kind of personal power is network power. We all know people, and sometimes we want access to each other's networks. So, for example, I encourage people to continue following me at Nutshell Brainery and in the newsletter because I know a lot of hiring managers in the area. And I can help hook you up with these hiring managers and so forth. And so you want access to that network. Well, I want access to you as well, because watch this. right now you're a student, and maybe you're doing well in your career, and that's fine, and so on and so forth. But there's going to be a day that you are crushing it in your career. There's going to be a day that you have a lot of power and influence in your sphere. And I want to have access to you when you have that power and influence. I had many students in the past that are today real movers and shakers in various industries. And I tap them on the shoulder now and again and say, hey, help me understand this, or can you guest lecture here, or things like this. So I want access to your networks, and you want access to mine. Okay? All right. So, let's see here. Yeah, it's time for a break. It's time for a break. I've been doing a lot of talky. So let's take a quick break. I am going to come over to this one. I've changed my green. Okay, so it's 10:50. Let's go to say 10:55. Let's take a 5-minute break. And I'll kind of talk you through some stuff that I'm doing. So get up, move around, stretch, and so forth. You don't have to listen to me, but I'm going to talk anyway. You've noticed my green screen is different. I'm a lot more confined. I'm sitting and so forth. Well, that's because I'm in the process of redesigning my studio here. I'm going to change things up a little bit. Starting hopefully in a month or two, or a week or two, I want to do the studio in some fun ways. And one of the first videos I'm going to make is how to build your confidence like Tony Stark. Okay, that's a big one. So I've how to build your confidence like Tony Stark, and then how to practice decision making under pressure like Jason Bourne. So I'm going to set up the studio with a whole bunch of different things. So with that in mind, this came just the other day, just came yesterday. It is, of course, the Stark, arc reactor, proof that Tony Stark has a heart. So I'm going to set this up in my studio to be a background item, especially as I'm talking about how to build confidence like Tony Stark. So I'm looking forward to that. And yes, it it helps if it's plugged in. But the funny thing about it is that there's no switch on it. It turns on and off with clapping, just like Tony Stark did. Kind of funny. Then, as I mentioned, I'm going to do a video on decision making under pressure like Jason Bourne. And so I'll have this in the studio. Now, if you know the Bourne movies, especially the first movie, The Bourne Identity, he still has amnesia. He gets a whole bunch of stuff out of his safe deposit box and throws it in this red bag at the bank. And so he's carrying around this red bag through most of the movie because it has all of his stuff in it. And the stuff that he has in it is a whole bunch of money from different countries and so forth. So I've got that. He's got a whole bunch of different IDs. So I have IDs from when I lived in England. I have a passport, a card from when I was in France, ID. I have a British passport. I have a French pass there. I have another passport and all kinds of things. So it's meant to look like a Bourne bag, right? So this is something I'm working on right now. It's not done yet. In fact, it's hardly even begun, but something that's going to be kind of fun. How are we? We're looking good. So, yeah, I'm redesigning the studio. And won't be using the green screen as much. Nevertheless, I want to keep a green screen as an option because I like being able to do this sort of thing now and again. All right, 54. We'll wait just a moment, get folks back in, and then we are going to bring this on over to situational leadership. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's come back over here. Now, remember, all of the folks that we've talked about so far, Henri Fayol and Douglas McGregor, they believe in situational leadership. You need to bring about a different kind of leadership for different situations. So let me give you some examples of this. Let's say that your audience members, your employees, your students don't have information they need. Well, this is a time where you as a manager, you need to educate and communicate. So as a professor, right, you need information to do well in the class. And you want to do well in the class because you want those grades, right? So it is my job as a professor, using education and communication, to explain things, to show you where the material is, explain what the material means, to give you access to resources and so forth. All of these things are me practicing situational leadership in an environment where my audience, my students, don't have information that they need to be successful. I then provide that information. Okay, that's one situation. Another situation is sometimes you'll have employees or students who feel excluded. They don't really feel included in the process. Well, then what a good leader does, manager, professor, what have you, is they find ways to encourage participation and involvement. And so, for an example, that's what I have these light bulbs down here for, is this is kind of my way of providing a conduit for people who are normally kind of quiet to be involved. I've actually run surveys on this with past students, and I've had many students tell me that they are more likely to comment in the comment section in the chat than they are to speak up in a classroom. Because in a classroom, when you speak up, you're the center of attention. Everybody turns around and looks at you, and then they look at what the professor says and so on and so forth. You're kind of on center stage. So a lot of students are more quiet. Whereas in a chat, you're not center stage, right? You can just throw a comment in there and the professor will read it. And you've noticed I have a pretty consistent modus operandi. I read the comment, we talk about it, we move on. So that is a form of leadership when people feel excluded. Another one is sometimes anxiety is really high. So at this time, a good manager, leader, needs to provide facilitation and support. By the way, real quick, Mary says, that's why online works for me. It takes off pressure from public speaking, and you can be more vocal online. Exactly. I totally get it. In the case of anxiety here, one of the things you notice as a professor is that the hardest you work are the first 2 weeks of class and the last 2 weeks of class. Well, now, why is this? Because it's in the first 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks that anxiety is highest with your students. Because the first 2 weeks, you're trying to figure the class out. The last 2 weeks, you're worried about your final grade and so forth. So anxiety goes up in the first and last 2 weeks. So what does a professor do? Or a manager, right? Facilitation and support. In my case, you'll always hear me say things like, don't worry, there's always a solution. All we have to do is this. don't worry. We're going to do a final review. We have the final, study guide and so forth. I'm going to meet with all of you and we'll go through the review. You're going to do just fine. If you've got some missing points, don't worry. You can do some extra credit. In other words, I tried to bring the anxiety down so that the student can go, okay, I can do this. I can make my way through. Sometimes when resistors are in position of power and influence, a manager needs to go through negotiation and agreement. Okay, so what I'm meaning here is that, yes, managers or professors have power, but oftentimes the folks that we're working with have power as well. And we can't just say, do it this way. It's more along the lines of how can we come to an agreement. So a good manager in these cases knows how to negotiate and come to a consensus, come to an agreement. For example, in the way that I teach these live streams and so forth, I have worked with my leadership to make sure that I'm doing it in a way that works for me, but then I'm also doing it in a way that works for them. Neither one of us can say it's my way or the highway because we both have power and influence. So we have to negotiate, and it works great. Then sometimes the organizational objectives are at risk. Every once in a while, as a manager, you have to basically explicitly coerce is the word that McGregor used, but it's basically force. Sometimes leadership has to force someone to do something. So, for example, when the building is burning down, the fire department doesn't come in and asks everyone politely to get up and leave the building. They will come and yank you out of your chair and force you out of the building. And you might, hey, you're invading my personal rights. And it's like, wait, dude, I'm a firefighter. It's my job to get you out of the burning building and save your life. You're out. So sometimes when things are at risk, you just need to lay down the law. So, for example, if toward the end of the semester, if a student it's Wednesday and they have not yet done a final paper, and without the final paper, they won't pass, I'll tell them, you got to do this final paper. Well, can I do this instead? No, your grade is on the line. We have no time. We can't dilly-dally with this anymore. You got to do the final paper because your grade is at risk and there's nothing we can do about it. This is the only way to do it. And so I explicitly coerce in saying, you won't pass the class. You don't want that. Okay. Last one, folks. Last reading that we go over. Principles of Scientific Management by Frederick Taylor. Let's go back to my FedEx and UPS story for a moment. So with FedEx, I got to make all my own decisions. I got to practice initiative and do the route the way I wanted to do it, which means I'm happy, but I may not be as efficient as I could be otherwise. UPS, on the other hand, they have a computer specifically designed, this software specifically designed for UPS to figure out the optimal route that the driver should take when delivering the packages. They will be more efficient than me. They will be more on time, less driving erratically, yada, 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 means more money for the company. But it means that the customer, the courier can't exercise any initiative. They're just doing what the computer told them to do. So pros and cons on each side. Well, Frederick Taylor is all about the computer. He doesn't want individuals making any decisions. He just wants the individual workers to do exactly what they've been told to do in exactly the way that they've been trained to do it. Okay? He's an engineer by trade, and he just sees employees as cogs in the machinery. I'm not exaggerating, okay? He says, listen, they are there to do the job. It's all part of a great big human machine to get the work done. And the cogs don't decide the best way to do it. The designers decide the best way to do it. So he came up with something called scientific management, applying time motion studies to figure out the most optimal way to do things. If any of you have ever worked in, say, fast food, I don't know if you've worked in fast food, but it's all about optimal design, operational excellence. Your job is to do this in the exact same way over and over and over. Kind of the things that Karl Marx says were problematic before. Well, Frederick Taylor is systematizing the things that were problematic to Karl Marx. But the outcome is extreme efficiency, really, really high levels of efficiency. Now, what he does in the reading is he tells the story of how a guy named Gilbreth used the methodology of time motion studies to improve bricklaying. Now, I'm going to go off and I'm going to read what he says Gilbreth said. It sounds like an endorsement, right? It's basically an endorsement of Frederick Taylor and so forth. But the principles hold up. So let's talk about this. For hundreds of years, there have been little to no improvement made in the implements and materials used in the trade, bricklaying, nor in fact in the method of laying bricks. In spite of millions of men who have practiced this trade, no great improvement has been, made for many generations. So then here's the endorsement. Mr. Frank B. Gilbreth, a member of our society who himself studied bricklaying in his youth, became interested in the principles of scientific management and decided to apply them to the art of bricklaying. Okay, well, let's see what happens. First, he made an intensely interesting analysis and study of each movement of the bricklayer, and one after another eliminated all unnecessary movements and substituted fast for slow motions. He experimented with every minute element in which, any ways affect the speed and tiring of the bricklayer. Okay, so let me explain. Bricklayers lay bricks, and this means a lot of movements. Okay, reach down, pick up a brick, have the trowel, reach down, get some mortar, set the brick, adjust the mortar, and do this over and over and over and over, right? Well, some of these steps are necessary. Some of them are not necessary. Some of them are efficient. Some of them could use some tweaking and so forth. So the first thing Gilbreth did was he studied through time motion studies every aspect of laying a brick. How much time did it take you to do what kind of motion? Okay, so that's it, time motion. All right, let's keep going. He developed the exact position which each of the feet of the bricklayer should occupy in relation to the wall, the mortar box, the piles of bricks, and so on and so forth. Next paragraph, he studied the best height for the mortar box and brick pile, and then designed a scaffold with a table upon it. So in other words, after doing all the time motion studies and figuring out where there were inefficiencies in laying bricks, he then designed a system that the bricklayers could follow to lay bricks to maximum efficiency. Okay, great. Through all this minute study of the motion to be made by the bricklayer in laying bricks under standard conditions, Mr. Galbraith has reduced his movements from 18 motions per brick to 5, and even in one case as low as 2 motions per brick. Okay, I don't know about that. I'd like to see it. But the point is, 18 to 5, that's a lot fewer motions, and it's a lot more efficient, okay? Now, here's the kicker, though. Here's the kicker, and this is where we see where Frederick Taylor believes managers belong and where employees belong. It is highly likely that many times during all these years, individual bricklayers have recognized the possibility of eliminating each one of these unnecessary motions. But even if in the past he did invent such one of Mr. Galbraith's improvements, no bricklayer alone could increase his speed through adoption, because it will be remembered that in all cases, several bricklayers work together in a row, and that the walls all around a building must grow at the same rate of speed. No one bricklayer then can work much faster than the one next to him, nor has any one workman the authority to make other men cooperate with him to do faster work. Okay, so while Frederick Taylor concedes that perhaps other people have seen these opportunities for efficiency, gains in efficiency, it wouldn't work because everybody needs to do it the exact same way. And that is where managers come into play, says Taylor. It is only through enforced standardization of methods, enforced adoption of the best implements and working conditions, and enforced cooperation that this faster work can be assured. And the duty of enforcing the adoption of standards and of enforcing this cooperation rests with the manager alone. So this is why fast food is fast, because there is a system, everybody knows their job, everybody does it in the exact same way. It has been studied over and over ad nauseum to make sure that the system is quick and efficient. And so workers are not exercising their own initiative, they're executing to the process. And Frederick Taylor's work continues on today. So just sort of depends on the industry. All right. So in the past, the man has been first. In the future, the system must be first. That freaking scares the hell out of me, but that's Frederick Taylor for you. Julian, you are only as fast as the slowest worker. This is something that was told to me often in military boot camp. Yes. As fast as the slowest worker. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Yes, absolutely. And so enforced standardization makes sure that everybody can come up to an optimal level. That's exactly right, Julian. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so holy smoke, folks. That was a long hour, 15 minutes, I admit. But we made it through. We've only got a couple lectures left, and so hang in there. You're doing fantastic. And thank you very much for your participation today. By the way, future means AI. Yes, and I'll give a couple for that. Let's get at least some points there, right? As always, please do me a favor and send me an email letting me know that you were here, and I'll take care of you for the points. I'm going to stick around if you have any questions, any comments, anything like that. Otherwise, we are all set. Jagat, Raphael, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and we will see you guys again next week. Hope you have a fantastic week. And like I said, if you have any questions or anything, Jordan, thank you. Mary, thank you very much. Appreciate your participation. Raphael, I just got that online. I got it through Amazon. And so, yeah, came from who knows where, but that's where I got it. Yeah, Cassie, let's talk. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. So, Raphael, next semester, I'll be teaching business communication. That's Business 2200. And then an international class, that's Management 1060. And then I think I teach an HR class as well, which is Management 2070. So, yeah, bunch of classes. Thanks, Mia. Yeah, Raphael, if you need one of those, let's hook up. All right, well, looks like folks are dropping off, so I'm going to call it a day, and we will see you all next week. Have a great one.